It lasted only 7 minutes. 7 minutes that would forever change how America viewed both Hunter Biden's case and the integrity of congressional oversight. The House Judiciary Committee was deep into what everyone expected to be another routine hearing about the Biden family's business dealing. Republican members had been hammering away with their usual talking points, Democrats had been deflecting with their standard responses, and the media was already preparing their predictable coverage. But nobody, absolutely nobody, was prepared for what Jasmine Crockett was about to unleash. As the young congresswoman from Texas slowly rose from her seat, something in her demeanor should have alerted everyone that this wasn't going to be business as usual. There was a stillness about her, a calculated calm that contrasted sharply with the partisan chaos that had dominated the hearing room for hours. In her hand she held a manila folder that would soon prove to contain information that would shock everyone in that room, including her own Democratic colleagues. What she was about to reveal wasn't just about Hunter Biden, it was about something far more dangerous. Something that went to the very heart of how justice works in America when you have the right connections and the right last name. The committee chair Jim Jordan had just finished his opening statement about the need for accountability and equal justice under law. The irony of what was about to happen was almost too perfect. Jordan, who had spent years defending Trump's family from similar scrutiny, was now demanding the highest standards of transparency for the Biden family. But Crockett wasn't interested in partisan games or political theater. She had discovered something during her own investigation. Something that her Democratic leadership had specifically asked her not to pursue. Something that would prove she was right all along about the real corruption in this case. You see, 3 weeks earlier Crockett had received an unexpected phone call from a federal prosecutor who had been working on financial crimes cases for over 2 decades. This prosecutor, whose name I can't reveal for obvious reasons, had been watching the Hunter Biden case unfold with growing concern. Not because he thought Hunter was innocent, but because of what he was seeing happen behind the scenes. The prosecutor told Crockett something that chilled her to the bone. Congresswoman, you need to understand that this case isn't really about Hunter Biden's business dealings. It's about covering up something much bigger. And if you don't speak up, nobody will. That phone call had led Crockett down a rabbit hole of financial records, phone logs and witness testimonies that painted a picture so disturbing that even she initially didn't want to believe it. But the evidence was overwhelming, documented and impossible to dismiss. And now, sitting in that committee room, watching her colleagues go through their scripted performances, she knew it was time to reveal the truth. When Jordan called on her for questions, Crockett didn't start with Hunter Biden at all. Instead, she asked a question that seemed completely unrelated. Mr. Chairman, are you familiar with the Foreign Agents Registration Act violations that were dismissed in the Southern District of New York between 2019 and 2021? Jordan looked confused. This wasn't in his briefing material. I'm not sure what you're referring to, Congresswoman Crockett. I'm referring to 17 separate FARA violations involving foreign lobbying for Ukrainian energy companies that were quietly dismissed without prosecution. Would you like to know who was responsible for those dismissals? The room suddenly felt different. Democratic members were exchanging worried glances. Republican members sensed an opportunity but weren't sure where this was going. Crockett opened her manila folder and pulled out a document that she held up for everyone to see. This is a Department of Justice memo dated March 15, 2021, signed by Deputy Attorney General Lisa Monaco, specifically ordering the dismissal of these FARA cases. But here's what makes it interesting, Mr. Chairman. These weren't random cases. They all involved the same Ukrainian energy company that hired Hunter Biden. And they were all dismissed exactly 36 hours after Hunter Biden's business partner testified before a grand jury about these very relationships. The silence in the room was deafening. You could hear the cameras clicking, the pencils scribbling, the hearts beating. Jordan tried to regain control. Congresswoman, I'm not sure how this relates to our investigation into. It relates directly to our investigation. Crockett interrupted with a steel in her voice that nobody had heard before. Because what we're really looking at here isn't Hunter Biden's corruption. It's the systematic suppression of evidence that would have implicated dozens of other people in both parties. Hunter Biden isn't the criminal here, Mr. Chairman. He's the scapegoat. The word scapegoat hit the room like a thunderbolt. Democratic members looked panicked. Republican members looked confused. And Jasmine Crockett looked like someone who had just lit a fuse and was waiting for the explosion. She continued, her voice growing stronger with each word. The real question this committee should be asking is why the Department of Justice chose to prosecute Hunter Biden for tax violations and gun charges, while simultaneously dismissing far more serious FARA violations that would have exposed. a network of illegal foreign influence operations involving members of both parties. She pulled out another document. This is a list of 37 current and former members of Congress who received payments from the same Ukrainian sources that hired Hunter Biden. Some of them are Republicans, some of them are Democrats, and some of them are sitting in this room right now. The room erupted. Republicans were shouting for order, Democrats were demanding she stop, and the media was frantically trying to process what they were hearing. But Crockett wasn't finished. Mr. Chairman, you asked for accountability and equal justice under law. I'm giving it to you. But are you prepared to investigate your own colleagues? Are you prepared to subpoena the financial records of every member of Congress who took money from these Ukrainian sources? Or are we only interested in accountability when it's politically convenient? Jordan was visibly struggling. He hadn't expected this. Nobody had expected this. The Hunter Biden investigation was supposed to be a simple partisan attack on the Biden family. It wasn't supposed to expose corruption that implicated members of both parties. Congresswoman Crockett, Jordan said, trying to sound authoritative, these are serious allegations that would require proper investigation, and they've already been investigated. Crockett shot back. The FBI has had this information for over 2 years. The Department of Justice has had it for 18 months, and congressional leadership in both parties has been briefed on it multiple times. The only reason you don't know about it, Mr. Chairman, is because your own leadership chose not to tell you. The implications of what she was saying were staggering. If Crockett was right, then the entire Hunter Biden investigation was a carefully orchestrated distraction designed to protect much bigger fish. The young prosecutor who had called Crockett weeks earlier had been right. This wasn't about Hunter Biden at all. But the most shocking revelation was still coming. Crockett reached into her folder one more time and pulled out a photograph. She held it up so the cameras could see it clearly. This photograph was taken at a private dinner in Georgetown on April 3rd. That's Hunter Biden on the left. That's his business partner Devon Archer in the middle. And that's Congressman Jim Jordan on the right. The room exploded into chaos. Jordan was on his feet, shouting that the photograph was fake, that this was a setup, that Crockett was lying. But Crockett remained calm, her voice cutting through the noise. This dinner took place 3 days before Devon Archer was supposed to testify before the grand jury about the Ukrainian payment. According to the restaurant's records, the bill was paid by a corporate credit card registered to an energy consulting firm based in Delaware, the same firm that employed Hunter Biden. The same firm that paid 17 members of Congress for consulting services they never actually performed. The revelation that Jordan himself had been at a private dinner with Hunter Biden and his business partners while supposedly investigating them was beyond explosive. It was the kind of scandal that could end careers and reshape American politics. But Crockett still wasn't done. Mr. Chairman, would you like to explain to this committee and to the American people why you attended a private dinner with the subject of your own investigation? Would you like to explain why you never disclosed this relationship? Would you like to explain why you accepted payments from the same Ukrainian sources that you're now investigating? Jordan was red-faced, stammering, completely unprepared for this line of attack. His Republican colleagues were trying to figure out whether to defend him or distance themselves. The Democratic members were equally shocked, but for different reasons. They were realizing that Crockett had just blown up the entire political establishment's carefully constructed narrative about the Biden family. What happened next would be replayed on every news network for weeks. Jordan, desperate to regain control, made the mistake of trying to attack Crockett personally. The gentle lady from Texas is clearly out of order and is making baseless accusations without evidence. Without evidence, Crockett's voice rose for the first time and the power in it silenced the entire room. Mr. Chairman, I have 47 pages of financial records, 12 hours of recorded phone conversations, 18 witness statements, and photographic evidence of your personal relationship with the Biden family's business partner. I have evidence that you accepted $47,000 in consulting fees from Ukrainian sources while serving on this committee. I have evidence that you attended at least 6 private meetings with Hunter Biden's business associates, and I have evidence that you personally intervened to ensure that certain evidence was excluded from this investigation. She stood up and her presence seemed to fill the entire room. So please, Mr. Chairman, tell me more about baseless accusations without evidence. The silence that followed was the silence of a political earthquake. In less than 10 minutes, Jasmine Crockett had not only exposed the hypocrisy of the Hunter Biden investigation, but had implicated the committee chairman himself in the very corruption he was supposedly investigating. The media was going crazy. Democratic members were frantically texting their staff, and Republican members were wondering if they should continue supporting Jordan or start looking for exit. But the most important moment came when Crockett delivered her final statement, the one that would be quoted in history books. The American people deserve to know the truth about corruption in their government. Not selective truth, not partisan truth, not convenient truth, the whole truth. And if this committee is serious about accountability, then we need to investigate everyone who took money from these Ukrainian sources, regardless of their party affiliation, regardless of their position, and regardless of how uncomfortable it makes. She gathered her papers, closed her folder, and sat down. The hearing room was in complete chaos, but Jasmine Crockett sat calmly, knowing that she had just changed American politics forever. What she had done wasn't just brave, it was revolution. In a political system built on mutual protection and partisan loyalty, she had chosen truth over comfort, justice over politics, and accountability over party unity. The fallout was immediate and explosive. Within hours, Crockett truth was trending on every social media platform. News networks were scrambling to verify her claims. Congressional leaders from both parties were calling emergency meetings. And somewhere in Delaware, Hunter Biden was probably wondering whether Jasmine Crockett had just saved him or destroyed him. But for Crockett herself, sitting in her congressional office that evening, looking out at the Capitol dome, there was only one feeling: relief. Relief that she had finally told the truth. Relief that she had lived up to her oath of office. And relief that she had proven once and for all that sometimes one person with courage and evidence can take on the entire political establishment and win. The Hunter Biden case would never be the same. American politics would never be the same. And Jasmine Crockett had just announced to the world that she was a force that nobody should ever underestimate again. But what happened in the days following that explosive hearing would prove that Crockett's intervention had consequences far beyond anyone's imagination. Within 48 hours, 3 more members of Congress announced they would not be seeking re-election, citing personal reasons that everyone knew were actually legal reasons. The FBI opened a new investigation into congressional corruption that would eventually lead to indictments of 7 sitting members of both parties. And perhaps most shocking of all, Hunter Biden himself requested a meeting with Crockett, a meeting that would reveal the final piece of the puzzle that even she hadn't expected. When Hunter Biden walked into Crockett's congressional office on a rainy Thursday morning, he looked nothing like the cocky, entitled figure that Republicans had been portraying for years. He looked tired, worn down, but also strangely relieved. "Congresswoman Crockett," he said, settling into the chair across from her desk, "I need to thank you for what you did in that hearing room, but I also need to tell you something that I've never told anyone else. Something that explains why this whole investigation has been such a charade from the beginning." Crockett leaned forward, sensing that she was about to hear something that would change everything yet again. "What is it, Mr. Biden?" Hunter pulled out his own manila folder, one that was even thicker than the one Crockett had brought to the hearing. "For the past 3 years I've been working as an informant for the FBI. Every meeting I took, every business deal I discussed, every phone call I made with these Ukrainian contacts, it was all being recorded and monitored by federal agents. The FBI asked me to maintain these relationships specifically to expose the network of corruption that you just revealed in that committee room." The revelation hit Crockett like a physical blow. Hunter Biden hadn't been the corrupt businessman taking advantage of his family name. He had been an undercover asset, helping to expose the very corruption he was being accused of participating in. "The tax charges, the gun charges, those were real, and I deserved them," Hunter continued. "But the Ukrainian business dealings that everyone's been investigating, that was all part of an FBI operation to identify which members of Congress were willing to take foreign money in exchange for influence. And you just exposed the entire network in a single hearing." Crockett sat back in her chair, trying to process what she was hearing. Why didn't the FBI or the Justice Department reveal this? Why let you go through this public humiliation? Hunter smiled sadly, because they needed to see how far the corruption went. They needed to see which prosecutors would look the other way, which congressional leaders would try to cover things up, which media outlets would participate in the cover-up. "Your intervention yesterday forced their hand. They can't keep this operation secret anymore, which means they can now move forward with prosecutions." The implications were staggering. The entire Hunter Biden scandal, which had dominated American politics for years, had actually been a carefully orchestrated sting operation designed to expose corruption at the highest levels of government. And Jasmine Crockett, through her fearless pursuit of the truth, had inadvertently blown the cover off the biggest anti-corruption investigation in modern American history. "There's something else," Hunter said, reaching into his folder again. "The FBI has been monitoring communications between certain members of your own Democratic leadership and these Ukrainian sources. Some of your colleagues knew about this operation and tried to shut it down to protect themselves and their Republican counterparts. When you decided to go public with this information against your leadership's wishes, you weren't just being brave,
You were saving an investigation that corrupt politicians in both parties were trying to kill. As Hunter Biden left her office that morning, Crockett realized that her moment of courage in that committee room had been even more significant than she had imagined. She hadn't just exposed corruption, she had saved the very investigation that would clean up American politics. The young prosecutor, who had first called her weeks earlier, had been right about everything. This wasn't about Hunter Biden at all, it was about something much bigger. And now, thanks to Jasmine Crockett's refusal to stay silent, the truth was finally going to come out. Over the following months, as indictments were handed down and congressional careers ended in disgrace, Crockett would often think back to that 7-minute intervention that changed everything. She had walked into that hearing room thinking she was exposing a cover-up. She had walked out having inadvertently saved the most important anti-corruption investigation in a generation. But perhaps the most important lesson of all was this: sometimes the truth is so much stranger and more complex than anyone realizes. And sometimes the courage to speak up in one moment can change the entire course of history.